We continue to discuss the factional battles in the African National Congress. This as the party's National Executive Committee began to sit for a special meeting today to discuss corruption in its ranks amid increasing threats of divisions. For more on the upheaval within the ruling party, we're joined by political analyst Tessa Doomss. Tessa, good evening. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Let's just, understand firstly where we are currently with the ANC. Is this, yet another sign that the center is not holding, particularly on that unity card that the president campaigned on at Newzroom?
Well, certainly, Bongiwe, I think this is a very important moment to tell whether or not the president's promise of unity within the party is one that he can deliver on. I think so far we've seen a very tenuous version of unity, one that has been about closing ranks rather than one that has really shown a definitive breaking of the factions. And I think this week was a laying down of the gauntlet, really. If you think about the letter that came from the president of the ANC and the letter that came from the former president of the ANC, really showing that the factions are still there, really showing that the issues that the two factions claim to be interested in from the 54th conference seem to be different, showing that the ways in which people are seeing and thinking about how to deal with corruption are different. And you're not seeing really a common voice. You're seeing a president who's having to fight for his right to lead the party and being pushed by dissident voices at minimum, and even by a very public now call for his head.
And let's talk about, those letters. And I want us to look at the latest one by former President Jacob Zuma. And he says, and I quote, "Mr. President, the statement that you make is not helpful to the ANC in my respectable view. For all intents and purposes, it can only serve to destroy the ANC, particularly if the head of the ANC pleads guilty on behalf of the ANC and calls the ANC the accused number one. Your actions are unprecedented in this regard. Mr. President, you are indeed the first president of the ANC to stand in public and accuse the ANC of criminality, and that the ANC must be the accused number one as accusations of corruption mount." Certainly not mincing his words there, former President Jacob Zuma, and even saying that this statement, this letter that was penned to ANC members by President Cyril Ramaphosa certainly doesn't help matters.
Yeah, I think there are two things that are interesting about that. The first is that the president of the ANC did not necessarily go on a wholesale, the idea that every member of the ANC in every part of the ANC has committed acts of corruption. But more importantly for me, when the former president Jacob Zuma says that, you can't put the ANC up there as accused number one, it seems to do two things. One, take away the responsibility that the ANC has as both the leader of government and its self-proclaimed role as the leader of society, to take responsibility for where it has led our society and our government. But also the ANC is known for calling for a stance that is about collective responsibility. And so you would think that a president of the ANC standing up and saying, as a collective, we see the problem, we take responsibility for this problem, we intend to work on this problem because we see our role in this problem as an organization, would be the epitome of taking collective responsibility. And so you wonder whether those words from the former president are aligned with the very history of the ANC and the workings of the ANC that he accuses the current president of not knowing.
And Tessa, the timing of this letter, by former President Jacob Zuma certainly cannot be ignored when you look at what has been going on in the political arena. Do you get a sense that, because when we spoke to some ANC members earlier, they were telling us that this may have something to do, the fight back, the apparent fight back against President Cyril Ramaphosa may have something to do with the strengthening of law enforcement agencies. Is it something that you agree with?
I think the strengthening of law enforcement agencies would be a secondary concern. I do think that there is something to be said for the president and the ANC's reliance on law enforcement agencies. But I do think that that's a separate concern and a separate issue to the ANC's ability to deal with its issues politically and the political solutions that it needs to seek. Because ultimately, if you have an ANC president that is defeated politically on the issues, that doesn't have a strong way to rally around the party and get the party on his side on these issues, if he finds himself in a position where the ANC is calling for his head and his own compatriots do not fall in line with what he's trying to do when it comes to corruption, really the law enforcement is not necessarily under his control for the most part in terms of what happens there, but what is in his control are the political powers that he has, and that is where the strengths or the weaknesses of this president are going to show more than how the law takes its course.
And let's talk then about his decision to subject himself to the Integrity Commission. Some say that, of course, this is an organization that has been treated as toothless within the party and its recommendations have been ignored and they're not confident about this and the outcome. What do you make of his decision to subject himself to this process?
Well, it's a curious one because I think it is a response to what has happened this week. The idea that if we're going to say that accused people must step aside, we've heard the call from the Tony Yangenis of the world, today from the Masinas of the world, who have said, well, then you sir, are also accused as the president of the ANC and should step aside. So I think this is a political maneuver to try and get around that argument, to say I am subjecting myself to processes. However, like you rightfully point out, very many people have lost faith in the ability of the Integrity Committee's teeth and their rulings to mean anything. Just a few weeks ago, we heard that the Deputy Minister of Finance, David Masondu, was told by the Integrity Committee in no uncertain terms that they recommend that he step down for his use of the Hawks and the Hawks' power in a private matter. And you didn't hear anything come from within the ANC or within the presidency to say anything about that issue. And so again, that reinforces that the Integrity Committee, while a useful political instrument, is not necessarily one that a lot of people have confidence in.
And Tessa, what do you think is behind this latest, fight back campaign? Because some are saying that there does appear to be a renewal of that.
Well, the president of the ANC and the president of the country needs to show that he is the one that is in charge of leading the ANC into beyond this crisis that it faces, the crisis of credibility that it faces with the South African public. And I think what's clear is that people are not going to just sit back and allow that to happen, sit back and allow the president just to move forward. There is going to be an attempt from inside the ANC to take power back and to balance power at minimum within the party. And so I do think we're seeing a resurgence of this, and it's going to be about whether this president can keep support, even in his NEC. Remember that NASDAQ moment where we saw the NEC with a 3-3 divide of its factions. That told us that the president didn't really have a strong top six even. And so we have to watch how the broader NEC moves and how it shifts, and make sure that he needs to make sure really that he doesn't end up with an NEC who is willing to take the lead from somebody else and put him out of his place.
We've spoken to some people who say that they're not really expecting anything dramatic to come out of this NEC meeting. What's your sense?
What should come out of this NEC meeting is a very firm stance and a position by the ANC on how it is going to internally deal with corruption, something that is a unified voice around how it's going to internally deal with corruption, what its place and role in society is going to be when it comes to not only corruption but governance generally, in the lead of both an election that comes up in about 12 months' time, all things being equal, but also in the wake of a new political landscape that is starting to build, and people being willing to speak out against the ANC. If the ANC must do anything this weekend, it must show that it can at least on paper come up with resolutions that speak strongly and support the president and the political journey that he's been trying to take us all on, both as the public and as the ANC at large, in a very public way. The president has also made public his engagement with the ANC for the first time. That open letter became kind of an open season on having very public discussions about the ANC. And that's why we were able to see President Jacob Zuma's letter come out. And so if this does not go well and we don't come up with a unified, strong statement of support for the president and what he's trying to do within the party, we'll certainly know about it next week in a very public way.
And one of the things that the former president is really hard-hitting on is that the ANC should not take collective responsibility, as we were talking about a short while ago. And he says that it cannot be accused, number one, therefore should not be dipping its head in shame as, you know, the entire organization. Do you think that it should be the ANC that's dipping its head in shame here, or the president alone?
No, there's no way that the ANC could, at this late stage, deviate from the fact that corruption isn't just about one or two people. The accusations are not just about one or two people. Corruption is closely linked to service delivery of the ANC. It's closely linked to people's faith in the ANC's ability to deliver, because we're seeing it endemically at all levels of society, in all respects of governance. And so the ANC can certainly not take the position that it's going to be one person that's going to be focused on or two people that's going to be focused on. I think the president is right in taking a collective approach to this, because it's a recognition that there's an endemic problem. We all can see it as a country. And unless the ANC as a governing party says, we're going to do things differently in terms of deployment, we're going to take this seriously in terms of people taking responsibility and being accountable and holding each other accountable, we're not going to take them seriously as the voting public. And so I certainly think that it is going to have to be a collective responsibility in this case, as the ANC has said so many times before, as opposed to trying to pinpoint a few people and then say, well, that's the end of that.
Should it rethink the way it elects its presidents? Because some of the members are saying that it shouldn't take 4,000 delegates to elect the president of the ANC.
I mean, that's a very interesting way to think about it. I mean, if you think about it in light of what people like Herman Mashaba have been saying, or Musi Maimane have been saying that the entire political system is one that is too top-down, it is too disempowering of the voting public. And we have had questions in the past about whether or not even the branch systems that political parties have are really the will of the people, or whether people are being told which way to go based on patronage and political allegiances to particular personalities. If the ANC does go that route in terms of really rethinking itself, that would be a very inventive way of going about this. One that gives way more power back to the branches, way more power back to voters, even if they aren't in the ANC. I think that would be a progressive move forward for sure, and one that would align with some of the calls that are being made and some of the things that need to be done in terms of electoral reform entirely. The country is crying for accountability. The populace is crying for participation and the ability to be taken seriously. And the ability to do that within the political party system and giving people a voice would certainly not be a bad place to start.